What is going on, guys? So I'm really excited to pump out this video because this is the first video of a new video series that I'm doing, and it's basically detailing the different head coaches, the hottest head coach names that could potentially land in Jacksonville. I didn't really do this one last year, I'll be honest, because Urban Meyer's name leaked out pretty early, and I was like pretty much all about him. I was all over let's get Urban, and it really felt like that was going to be the move just because you just got that gut feeling that Urban was going to end up landing in Jacksonville, and that did happen. But this year it's different. Obviously, that was a mega failure for a bunch of different reasons. But for one reason or another, the Jaguars, he's no longer employed by the Jaguars, and now we're back on the head coaching hunt. And the Jaguars have an interesting situation. Obviously, it's a bad team, but you got Trevor Lawrence. You have some draft capital, obviously cap space. You have a lot of different stuff going on. So maybe this isn't the most attractive, but I still think it's a pretty decent landing spot for a head coach to come in here. It's just whether or not, it's really a matter of opinion about whether you feel like the Jaguars' job is a good job or not. So with all that said, man, the very first coach I want to get into, obviously by the title of this video, is Doug Pederson, former Super Bowl champion of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I kind of want to discuss him because really he is my number one candidate. You know what I mean? And before I really get into reasons why I really like Doug Pederson, I've brought on a Philadelphia Eagles YouTuber, Philly 500, to help me with the Eagles side of how he feels about Doug Pederson's fit in a Jaguars position.
You're right, doing. And for those that don't know, Philly 500 is my name. Double moonwalking is my game. And I have to let you know right out front that I am Philly 500 because most people confuse me for Denzel Washington. And I know you were probably looking at this going, why is UCF Jaguar have Denzel Washington on the show? Well, I'm not Denzel Washington, although I look a lot like him. Anyways, shout out to UCF Jaguar for having me on this segment. I really appreciate it. I hear there's big news going on in Jacksonville. I hear you finally fired that stinky coach, Urban Meyer. Thank God you got rid of him. He stinks. We could all agree on that. And now you have a very appealing, very lucrative head coaching job available. And why not? You have a franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. I still believe in him a lot. You just need to get the right coach to help develop this kid, and you got something special in your hands. No question about it. And one of the big leading candidates for this job for the Jaguars is one Doug Pederson. And I know Doug Pederson very well. He coached my Philadelphia Eagles, took us to our first Super Bowl. I have nothing but respect and love for Doug Pederson. And what I want to do in this video real quick is kind of give you guys what I think the good, the bad, and who the hell knows when it comes to Doug Pederson. As most of you guys probably know, Doug Pederson led us to a Super Bowl. He also took us to the playoffs 2 straight years after the Super Bowl. So essentially, he went to the playoffs 3 straight years and then got fired. I thought that the Eagles shouldn't have fired him. I thought he deserved another year. I thought a lot of things was not his fault, but he got fired nonetheless. And now the Jaguars have an opportunity to get a guy who I think would fit perfectly in Jacksonville. Now, here's the thing with Doug Pederson, okay? Doug Pederson is a former player, okay? He used to be the backup of Brett Favre, Donovan McNabb, and I think Dan Marino too. Don't quote me on that, but I think he might have been the backup to Dan Marino as well. He was around the NFL as a quarterback for a long time, became a coach, came up under Andy Reid, and he's a great head coach. If you guys could get him as a head coach, he would be the perfect fit. The things that I like most about Doug Pederson is Doug Pederson, and my favorite thing about him as a head coach is that his players will never quit on him. They never quit on him. They believe in him. They like him. He can communicate and talk to them. If they have an idea, if they think something's happening within a game, they can go up to him and tell him. He will listen to his players. For example, the 4th down play in the Super Bowl, the Philly special, as Philly. That was Nick Foles. Nick Foles said, "Let's run Philly." He said, "You want to do it?" He said, "Yes." And they made history in the Super Bowl running that play on fourth down. There were times where players went up to Doug during that 2017 season and said, "Hey, Doug, we need to run more. We need to do this." And he listened. So players will always play for him. They will never quit on him. After we went to the Super Bowl in 2018, 2019, both years we had so many injuries. We were basically left for dead, and he got those guys to continue fighting and got into the playoffs. So Doug, he's a leader, a natural leader of men, and the players will like him and play hard for him. That I really like. The other thing I really like about Doug Pederson is he's a big day coach. He's a big game coach, I should say, rather. He will go out there, and in the big games, the big moments, he's not afraid to be aggressive. He's not afraid to go try to win the game, okay? You get a lot of coaches oftentimes who play not to lose a game, play to stay in it. Doug plays to win. In 2017, Jacksonville, you guys had that problem where your head coach was too conservative versus New England. Doug was the complete opposite. So you're going to get a very, very aggressive coach. And like I said, he came up as a quarterback. He knows what it's like to be a quarterback in the NFL. And this is a big deal because Trevor Lawrence could use a guy like Doug Pederson to help him along the way. So those are the things I really love about Doug Pederson. The things I don't like about Doug Pederson as a coach, and I think he needs to work on, is Doug isn't a good strategist. He's not a good strategist. Sometimes he gets too predictable in his play calling. Sometimes he keeps doing the same things too much, and I think it really hurts him. Now, a lot of people give Frank Reich the credit for winning the Super Bowl, and to a certain level, I do too, because I think Frank Reich was a good strategist. He could look at players on his team and his offense and say, this is what he does good, this is what he does good, I am going to adjust the offense accordingly. And you saw that again in 2017. Carson Wentz is having an MVP year. He gets hurt. The Eagles bring in Nick Foles. They changed their whole offense. They went back and looked at what Nick Foles did. Okay, they looked at what Nick Foles did as in his best year with the Eagles under Chip Kelly, where he had 27 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and they added that to the offense. They started running a lot of RPOs and things like that. The Eagles go on to win a Super Bowl. Frank Reich ends up going to Indianapolis, and then Doug Pederson, he remains head coach. He brings in a new offensive coordinator, and the problem started really there for Doug. When Carson came back, instead of going back to what worked for Carson, he liked running those RPOs, and the things that Nick Foles did good, he tried to get Carson Wentz to do, and it didn't fit. So I think Doug needs to be a better strategist. I think that oftentimes is a problem. This could be fixed, and this could be solved if the Jaguars were to hire a good offensive coordinator to go along with Doug. When Doug has just head coaching responsibilities, he does a great job. When he has to be the head coach and the offensive coordinator, I think it's a problem. So that's one of my big complaints with Doug. The other thing is sometimes he's a little too reluctant to let the young guys play and some of the young talent. We kept Jason Peters way too many years past his prime when we had Jordan Mailata waiting for his opportunity to play. Now Jordan Mailata is one of the better left tackles in football, but he could have been playing 2-3 years ago. But Doug didn't want to put Mailata in place of Jason Peters. Now, some of these problems that I'm speaking of when it comes to Doug Pederson are also from the Eagles front office. We don't really know what Doug was told he had to do in terms of playing certain players with big contracts, certain draft picks. Doug had nothing to do with it. So I think if you can get Doug Pederson and you can get a coach who can just be a head coach, and he hires a good offensive coordinator, good defensive coordinator, and you let him focus on being a head coach, let your offensive coordinator do his thing, I think you're going to have a fantastic coach, one of the best coaches in the National Football League. Also, I'll say this. I think Doug Pederson, one of the reasons and one of the big fallouts with the Eagles was that he wanted more control of players, of who they drafted, who they brought in. The Eagles would not give him that. I think he needs the opportunity to bring in the players he wants to bring in to really fit the offense and stuff that he wants to run. But if you put Doug Pederson with Trevor Lawrence, I think he will create a really, really good, high level, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. If you're lucky to get Doug Pederson, I think he would be a great fit for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are kind of my thoughts on Doug Pederson. I wish the Jacksonville Jaguars nothing but luck and success, except for when you play my Eagles. And speaking of playing my Eagles, we beat you the last time we played in England, didn't we? We beat you, but it is what it is. Anyways, UCF Jaguar, one of my dream team, stream team partners. I'll kick it back to you, my man. Take care. Talk to you all later. And of course, Denzel Washington out. Oh, and one other thing regarding Doug Pederson, the relationship with him and Carson Wentz. A lot of talk about he ruined Carson Wentz. They didn't like each other. That stuff really wasn't true. Carson Wentz never had a problem with Doug Pederson. Carson Wentz had a problem with Howie Roseman, the GM who took Jalen Hurts in the second round when he promised him that he was going to get him weapons and things of that nature. The problem wasn't Doug Pederson, it was Howie Roseman. A lot of people have a misconception that Carson and Doug Pederson didn't like each other. Carson said that was never the case. Doug has said that's never the case. Sure, Carson Wentz wasn't happy when he got benched, but it wasn't Doug that he had a problem with. It was Howie Roseman and the GM. Once again, Denzel Washington out.
So huge shout out to Philly 500 for coming on here and helping me with just discussing Doug Pederson. You know what I mean? There's a lot of misconceptions kind of coming out there about Doug Pederson, mainly amongst Jaguar fans. You know what I mean? And I really, when I've gone on Twitter, really not a lot of Eagles fans have really anything negative to say about Doug Pederson except for Jaguar fans. I mean, Jaguar fans are the only people really with anything negative to say, just to kind of fit their narrative about who they may want as their head coach. So you kind of throw out negatives about these different guys. But Doug Pederson, I'll give you some good and bad from my standpoint. Some good is obviously that it's a Super Bowl champion. You know what I mean? I mean, how often is a Super Bowl champion, you know, at the age of 52, who still wants to coach, how often are they still out there? But that's the circumstance right now where Doug Pederson, he's out there available and he does want to be a head coach. So that's another good thing. He has a lot of success. I mean, going to the playoffs 3 out of 5 years, 2 division titles, that's all been very good. That's one thing that I really like about him. And also just he has head coaching experience. That's another thing. I think head coaching experience is a big prerequisite at this point because, man, like, we need to hit on this head coach, man. I mean, it's as much as I want to go for the sexy name, whether it be like Byron Leftwich or, you know, Brian Dable, these different guys that, you know, there's a lot of mystery behind them about, man, could this be the next great one? Doug Pederson is almost a safer thing because he has, you know, coached before, which is really, really good. And I also like the fact that, look, he's taken a year out of coaching. You know what I mean? He took the year off just to, obviously, I don't think he really got another job, but to be honest with you, you know, he could have gotten an office coordinator job, but he took the year to sit back and really study the NFL, watch the NFL from a broad standpoint. And, you know, I think that is pretty valuable because a lot of times when you're coaching a team, you're so locked into that team where, you know, maybe you kind of aren't seeing all the nuances of really what's going on all around the league. So I think that is a very, very good thing about him. And also, he has experience with a young quarterback. He had Carson Wentz playing at an MVP level while he was a head coach, whether it was Frank Reich or whatever. The fact of the matter is, I like to go by facts. And the fact is that while Carson Wentz was playing like an MVP candidate, he was a head coach. And then also when he got hurt, all of a sudden Nick Foles came in there and they won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. I mean, obviously we saw Nick Foles in a teal and black. It was not a very pretty sight, but he had them playing as a Super Bowl MVP. So I thought that was really cool about him. Another thing I like about Doug Pederson is that he is a player's coach. You know, he's a guy that, look, he may not be the softest. He might not be a Gus Bradley type, but, you know, he's a high energy guy. And look, like, he is going to demand respect from his players, and the players are going to respect him. They're going to want to play for him. I've seen multiple Eagles sources that have basically said that players do like him. He comes out there and he demands a lot from his players, but he comes from a perspective that that challenges them, but not in a bad way. It's more like, okay, what do you have? What can we work with? Let's make sure we maximize your potential. And a lot of players really did like that about him. So that's another good thing. I think another pretty good thing about him is really the offense that he runs. He ran a lot of RPO with both Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. And when you look back at really what Trevor Lawrence did in college, was that Trevor Lawrence was really good out of the RPO. I'm not saying go out there and run a full RPO type of system, but you had to go back and look at what Trevor Lawrence did well in college, because that's where he had some really, really good success, and it was out of that kind of system. Doug Pederson, it's a refreshing thing to look at him compared to Urban Meyer, because Urban Meyer, obviously on the sidelines, hands on his knees, wasn't doing a lot, just looked stressed. Doug Pederson's running all around. He has the play sheet in his hand. He called plays out there. While a lot of people do talk about Frank Reich was the whole reason for that offense, Doug Pederson was out there calling plays. You know what I mean? So that's another good thing. And I just like how energetic, how into the game he is. And I think that will really benefit him, really even benefit Trevor Lawrence, is that look like you have a head coach that is just pretty much an offensive genius that can come in there and do his thing. And, a lot of people go out there and look at the fact that, look, like he was, they look at a retread. But I remember another guy that left the Eagles job that basically got fired. It was almost like it was honestly a similar thing as Doug Pederson. It wasn't as much as Doug Pederson was fired. They mostly just, look, Doug Pederson got fired because he wanted to hire his own offensive coordinator. The GM and owner, they blocked that. They did not want him to hire that guy. So they basically shook hands and said, look, I'm out of here. Similar thing happened with Andy Reid. Andy Reid willingly left the Philadelphia Eagles, went over to the Kansas City Chiefs, and the rest is history. Similar to Doug Pederson, man. Doug Pederson was a really good coach, and now he's on the market. Now he left, and it's a really good time to hopefully jump on this guy. Now, some negative things about him. Obviously, the Carson Wentz relationship seemed like it went south. They had gone like a few months without even speaking. I don't know how true that is, but that is a little bit weird that the head coach and the quarterback, their relationship got so bad that they were not speaking. Now, I've always thought Carson Wentz was a little bit of a diva, a little bit of a prima donna. He always really just wanted to play with, with Frank Reich. And look, like Carson Wentz basically said, look, like I don't want to play for Doug Pederson. Doug Pederson's out of there. Then he said, okay, I don't want to play for the Eagles anymore. So that's one thing. And obviously the whole Frank Reich factor. Frank Reich, when he was with the Eagles, the offense was a lot better. I mean, it was. I mean, he has without Frank Reich, I believe they have a losing record, so that's one interesting thing. But you also look at it from the other side of it, and look, a head coach needs a great offensive staff. You want your staff to be picked apart by different head coaching hires, hiring these different guys from your teams. You look back at the previous Super Bowl winners. Even go back to 2017 when they won a Super Bowl. They had Frank Reich. 1 year later, the Patriots had Josh McDaniels. Then the Chiefs had Eric Bieniemy. A year later, the Buccaneers had Byron Leftwich. All of those guys are being considered, Frank Reich's already head coach. All the other guys are being considered for head coaches. Look, you need a great staff in order to win. And that's what Frank Reich had his first year. Or not Frank Reich, but that's what Doug Pederson had while he was over there. So that's another big thing behind it. But ultimately, really, with this head coaching hire, I really want Doug Pederson because I feel like he's a good fit for the Jaguars, just because when I look at other guys, and I look at like Byron Leftwich, I really like Byron Leftwich, but wouldn't it make more sense for Byron Leftwich to go to a team like the Seahawks or something like that, where the culture is already established? He can just go in and kind of continue to move it. Or even the Vikings, did they let go of Zimmer? That'd be a great fit for a guy like Byron Leftwich. Or even the Chicago Bears. The Jaguars is a whole different situation. The Jaguars, you're coming into a straight losing organization that's had bad culture for several years, going back to the Tom Coughlin days where he came back as, the czar of football operations. It's just you always see every year things leak out. These players aren't happy here, so you have to build that organization up and build that culture up. And that is a tall task for somebody as young as like Kellen Moore or Byron Leftwich to come into the situation. But when you come in with a guy like Doug Pederson or even Jim Caldwell, you know the task at hand. You know, like, look, this is how you build a culture. This is what you have to do. And they probably have a better idea of what they are going into. You know what I mean? And it's going to be a tall task for Doug Pederson to come in here. And there's also, how attractive is this job? I don't know. When I look at it, I feel like it is attractive just because, look, you have an owner who's very patient, who's not going to micromanage, who's not going to block you from making different coaching staff moves. If you want to hire an offense coordinator, Shad Khan's not going to say no. You know what I mean? And when Doug Pederson left the Eagles, he basically said, I'm tired of people telling me what to do. That's a lot of what went on over there in Philadelphia. So, you know, you have that. You're probably going to have the number one pick of the first round, and each round after that, two third-round picks, and also you go in and a lot of cap space, and just, you know, you have new practice facilities on the way. You're down in Florida, no state income taxes. I don't know, all that. You guys all know the qualities, I guess, of this, but the main thing are, look, you're coming into an organization that's crap. I mean, we are bad right now, and you thought coming off of Marone and Caldwell were bad, and now you had to rid the stink of Urban Meyer. But the good thing about this job is also, look, we go 6-11. We're rejoicing. We have wins. You know what I mean? So there's really not a lot of pressure to win right away. We just want to see continued progress, and we need to make sure Trevor Lawrence develops well, because he hasn't, for one reason or another, he has not been very good so far. And, you know, we got to fix that. You know, we got to figure out a way to fix that. So those are really some of the things about Doug Pederson that I really like. And huge shout out to Philly 500 for coming on here and helping me break things down. Let me know your guys' thoughts on Doug Pederson. And with all that said, I'll be coming out with more of these videos soon about these different coaching candidates. Drop a like for me if you guys can. Also join the Relevant app and join the Jaguars Fanatics Vibe down below for more shows from both me and Tom McManus. And with all that said, thank you guys for watching. Go Jags.